Hello, good evening. I think that I had a very challenging topic. My topic was ensuring expanded access to contraceptives is rights-based. So I'm not sure how many of you know, but the WHO has issued the guidance note, which covers the 9 human rights principles and standards around human rights-based contraceptive access. And amongst those are, of course, the principles and standards around non-discrimination, availability, accessibility, acceptability, and quality, informed decision-making, privacy, confidentiality, and participation and accountability. I think that the previous speakers that came before me have actually kind of covered the issues around the availability, accessibility, acceptability, and the quality aspects of it. So I thought I'd like to focus on 3 key areas that I have found to be something, maybe as a person from an NGO background, to be absolutely critical. So one is, of course, the principle of non-discrimination. I think that in the WHO recommendations, there are actually 2 that are related to non-discrimination. And one is to say, one covers the aspects of providing a comprehensive SRHR services, and to ensure that these services are actually provided equally without discrimination and violence and coercion. And I would like to build off what Carl kind of talked about young people, because young people are one such key group that allows us to think differently about access to contraceptive services and how they can be made to be rights-based, as well as the kind of the challenges that we will face should we decide to go down this path. So young people globally, aged 10 to 19, comprise something like 80% of the population, thereabouts, and from 10 to 24 comprise around 26% of the population. Approximately 664 million young people live in this part of the world, between South Asia and East Asia and the Pacific. So we have one of the largest demographics of young people. So, and we also know that evidence and studies have shown that adolescents and young people face discrimination in accessing contraceptive services. For example, in many countries, and some of these studies were done in Kenya, Zambia, Laos, and China, show that health providers believe distributing contraceptives to adolescents and young people is equated with promiscuity and encouraging promiscuity, right? And then there's, of course, young women are differently treated, and there are double standards around young women's sexual behavior. So, and there's also a prevailing idea, like young or nulliparous women are denied contraceptive services because contraception is seen as like spacing birth, not to preventing birth from the start, right? So these are all provider beliefs. So there's one whole set of issues we saw which were market related. But if we go one step further, who makes the markets? People make the markets, right? And this is the first and foremost thing that we really need to change, is the perspectives, the paradigm shift that needs to be happening in people's minds, whether they are government officials, service providers, or even women and girls at basic level within the household and the family. So if we look at this task, then we won't be so, I think, we would be able to budget for our time adequately in order to achieve the agenda in the way we want to achieve the agenda. So, and part of the human rights approach, which is very critical, is to protect, promote, and fulfill. This is what is generally talked about, right? There are 3 aspects that governments have to do. They have to protect, they have to promote, and they have to fulfill. And in this context, it's just like how Jagdish said, that fulfilling human rights to contraceptive access often covers these multifarious issues, which include, an obligation to end early marriage, fulfill young people's rights to privacy and confidentiality, which means like, having to scrap things like parental consent and spousal consent. And these, of course, make us go up against the hard issues in society. But we should be able to say, we need to be ready to face this. There is no easy way to do this, and so we should be ready for that challenge. And I think that one of the things is, another thing which is, of course, the question of integration, because when we talk about young people's access to contraceptives, they are facing an entire life cycle. They are just getting into this life cycle of sexual and reproductive health. So it is not only to say we're going to give them contraceptives between a certain age and that is somehow rights-based and deny them rights on so many other aspects of SRHR that they may need. So this is a question we need to ask ourselves. The second thing I think is very important to focus on is this principle of informed decision making. This is not a new principle. This has been there from time immemorial. And yet we find that in many parts of the world, women are not given the right kind of counseling about the various methods available, and they're not given the right kind of information on the type of side effects. And yet year after year after year, the DHS will come and tell you women are not using a method of contraception or discontinuing a method of contraception because of the fear of side effects, right? So why is it that we find so difficult to actually address this? And it can be done in such a, I don't know, in such a very market-oriented manner as well, because if you give the right information, women know how to handle, women and men know how to handle the side effects, know how to switch the method, have a good relationship with a service provider, can come back and you will have the results that you want from a market approach. And at the same time, you will have women and men and societies who are confident about access to contraception and have agency and control over their fertility and their bodies. So for me, it is this is really, really critical area for us to work on. And it's actually very critical to the success of even the access to contraception type of movement we're actually trying to start through this ICFP processes. And this is because I unfortunately come from a region which is quite known for coercive population control policies, right? We've seen it in Indonesia, we've seen it in China, we've seen it in India. And this unfortunately gives this entire movement a really negative name. And we still have those people who think about this agenda that way. At the same time, now we have rising fundamentalisms, as the minister spoke about. And for many of these, there's also a right that service providers need to be protected in some circumstances, because there are actually fundamentalists who do say contraception causes cancer. Contraception is, makes you, how do I say, barren in the long run. This is because, Westerners really want to end our race or our religion in some way. So I think that informed decision making and making sure that all of this information is given out, a lot of agency and mobility and empowerment is built around these issues of access to contraception is absolutely vital. The last thing, because I've got very little time, is accountability. So at the end of the day, we all come to these conferences. I work for a regional organization. I don't work on the front lines. I work with organizations who work on the front lines, but not directly, right? So we need to actually keep funding those frontline organizations. We have to fund those organizations who are talking about rights. They're able to hold their governments accountable, their service providers accountable to quality services, and they're also able to keep in check religious fundamentalist discourses that may be arising. Some of these are not easy things for us to do, but it's absolutely vital. And we have to continue saying, sexual and reproductive rights are indivisible rights. We cannot say there's a right to family planning, but perhaps not a right to safe abortion. We cannot say that, married heterosexual women need to get SRH services, but not LGBTIQ people. So we have to uphold that bastion of the universality and the indivisibility of sexual and reproductive rights.